Did you know that Max Verstappen finished fourth in Miami, not because of a lack of talent, but because of serious car problems? And most worryingly, Red Bull could be losing control of the championship right now. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Red Bull can regain its pace before it's too late? Is Max losing confidence in his team? In this video, we'll analyze what really happened at the 2025 Miami Grand Prix, Max Verstappen's harsh remarks, and why Red Bull could be facing a technical crisis at the worst possible time. Max Verstappen arrived at the 2025 Miami Grand Prix under pressure to make a statement after a difficult sprint and a growing threat from McLaren. Despite initial doubts about the RB21's performance, Max responded on Saturday with a near-perfect qualifying lap, taking pole with an impressive 1 minute and 26.204 seconds. At first glance, it seemed that Red Bull had managed to neutralize the criticism and that Max was ready to reaffirm his dominance. But the real story, as often happens in Formula One, began to unfold on Sunday, lap after lap, with every meter he moved away from that pole position. What began as a promising day quickly turned into a disconcerting scenario. From the opening laps, Verstappen failed to impose the pace to which he has accustomed us. Lando Norris, driving an aggressive and balanced McLaren, was hot on his heels, and when he had the opportunity, he didn't hesitate to overtake him with an ease that left many perplexed. The RB21, which had been precise and fast in qualifying, seemed like a completely different car in the race. More nervous, oversteering in fast corners and clearly struggling to maintain stability in medium-speed sequences. Max began to lose ground, and the most striking thing wasn't his position, but how vulnerable he looked, something unusual for him. What many didn't see was that Verstappen's fourth-place finish didn't actually reflect the all-out struggle Verstappen was putting in lap after lap to keep the car within its limits. His frustration was evident at the end of the race when, in post-race interviews, he made it clear that the car had been unpredictable, stating that even DRS wasn't enough to compete with the McLarens. The Dutchman described the car's behavior as erratic, changing from lap to lap, unable to give him the confidence to attack. Such statements are unusual for Max, who usually maintains his composure, indicating that the situation was not only unexpected but also deeply worrying. So, the context isn't simply that Verstappen didn't win. What matters is how it happened. This wasn't a driver error, nor a poorly executed strategy. It was a symptom of a deeper problem with the RB21, whose performance seems to be overly influenced by external factors such as temperature, asphalt type, or wear management. And that, in such a long season and with such close rivals, can be very costly. Now that we understand how this unexpected decline from pole position to fourth place happened, it's time to go into detail and analyze what's really happening with the Red Bull car and why many are beginning to think the team could be losing its hegemony just when it most needs to defend it. As the race unfolded in Miami, it became clear that Verstappen's main enemy wasn't Lando Norris or McLaren's pace, but his own car. The RB21, which had received so much praise for its aerodynamic efficiency and stability so far this season, showed its first signs of real technical vulnerability in the heat and humidity of Florida. From the start, Max reported unpredictable behavior over the radio, with imbalances that caused the car to go from sudden oversteer to inexplicable understeer for no apparent reason. This type of inconsistency is more than just a setback. In a sport where every tenth of a second counts, feeling the car change character mid-race can be devastating for a driver's confidence. One of the main sources of the problem was thermal management. The high temperatures in Miami exposed a weakness in the RB21's ability to dissipate heat efficiently. The cooling system, designed to offer maximum efficiency with minimal aerodynamic drag, appears to have fallen short in this scenario. This affected not only the power unit, which suffered from overheating, but also the brakes, which, according to Verstappen, weren't providing consistent feel. He himself said this after getting out of the car. The brakes were doing strange things, suddenly locking up for no explanation, then losing bite. I didn't know what to expect in each corner. This lack of predictability forced Max to drive conservatively, something that goes against his aggressive and meticulous style and also prevents him from truly fighting for the top positions. But it wasn't just the cooling system. Red Bull brought a package of updates to Miami focused on the car's floor, seeking to recover downforce in medium-speed corners without compromising top speed. These improvements, theoretically designed to close the gap to the McLarens, were used exclusively by Verstappen. However, rather than representing a leap forward, they ultimately revealed that the car still has a very narrow operating window. In other words, the RB21 only works well in very specific conditions, with controlled temperatures, good grip asphalt, and without too much degradation. Outside of that ideal range, the car loses much of its competitive ability. Most worrying for Red Bull is that these characteristics are not easily corrected with one or two modifications. They are integrated into the overall concept of the car. Changing this would require redesigning fundamental parts of the chassis and suspension, something that can't be done overnight. And in a season where aerodynamic improvements are developing at the pace of a single race, falling behind for 2 or 3 Grands Prix can be enough to lose the championship. Verstappen's frustration is not only about what happened in Miami, but about what this could mean for the coming races. Now, identifying problems is one thing, how to respond to them is quite another. Red Bull now knows it can't continue to rely on the car performing only under ideal conditions. And with McLaren pushing hard, the team's reaction will be key. Therefore, the next step is to analyze how both the team and Verstappen are responding to this critical situation, and whether they are truly making the right decisions to prevent the championship from slipping through their fingers. Red Bull's reaction to the problems evident in Miami was swift, but the most interesting aspect wasn't what was said publicly, but what began to circulate behind closed doors. Team principal Christian Horner tried to downplay the events, speaking of a complicated race in atypical conditions, but those familiar with the team's internal dynamics know that all the alarm bells were ringing. This wasn't simply a bad day. What happened in Miami confirmed that the RB21 is no longer invulnerable, and worse still, that its main rivals are finding ways to put it under technical and strategic pressure. Faced with this new situation, Red Bull is forced to change its approach, and it is doing so on 3 key fronts: technical development, internal management, and the role of Verstappen. On the technical front, the team accelerated data collection to more precisely understand why the car behaved so erratically. Milton Keynes engineers have been meticulously reviewing every variable, from aerodynamic simulations to wind-tunnel correlation, including analysis of temperature sensors, brakes, and suspension. Most revealing is that internal talk has begun about a review of the recently introduced aerodynamic package, and even a partial return to the previous specification is being considered at certain circuits, especially those with characteristics similar to Miami. It's a difficult decision because it means admitting that the evolution hasn't worked as expected. But in such a competitive season, pride cannot override performance. At the same time, there is growing tension in the sporting management department. Adrian Newey, architect of the championship-winning cars, is no longer as involved in day-to-day development as in previous seasons. His gradual withdrawal from the active work environment has been a silent but fundamental factor in the current challenges, and this has forced younger engineers to make critical decisions without the absolute support they were accustomed to. Furthermore, media pressure and rumors about his possible permanent departure have generated uncertainty at a time when absolute clarity is needed. Red Bull, for its part, has tried to contain this situation by strengthening communication with the technical team and developing contingency plans to ensure that the car's development isn't further hindered. And at the center of all this turmoil is Max Verstappen. His leadership within the team is no longer just a matter of on-track talent. With every statement, every gesture, Max is setting the emotional pulse of Red Bull. After Miami, his tone was different, more critical, more demanding, and also more distant. While he publicly stated that he trusts the team, he also made it clear that he isn't willing to tolerate repeated mistakes. And this has had a direct impact on how the team is handling simulator sessions, strategy preparation, and, above all, the way his technical reports are heard. There are those within the paddock who claim that Verstappen no longer feels as comfortable as in previous seasons and is beginning to exert pressure beyond what is usual. Not because he wants to leave the team immediately, but because he knows that his window of dominance could close faster than it seems if there is no immediate reaction. What is clear is that Red Bull is facing a pivotal moment in its season. How they respond in the next 2 or 3 races will determine whether the team can regain control or, on the contrary, if we are witnessing the beginning of a changing of the guard in Formula One. And what comes next will depend not only on the car, but also on strategic decisions, the team's mettle, and of course, Max Verstappen's level of commitment. Now that we understand how Red Bull is trying to correct course, it's time to ask ourselves, what would happen if they fail? What would be the implications of Verstappen's departure? And how would that change the balance of power across the grid? While Red Bull was trying to contain the damage and reorganize its strategies after the blow suffered in Miami, McLaren executed a move that left the entire grid, and especially Milton Keynes, on high alert. What the Woking team did wasn't simply win a race, it was to demonstrate that its technical project is reaching maturity and that it has the necessary elements to become a real title contender, not in the long term but now. From the start of the weekend, McLaren displayed unusual confidence. Not only did they bring a package of aerodynamic updates that worked perfectly, but they implemented it with surgical precision. Every change, from the redesigned floor to the cooling inlets, fit the circuit as if the car had been specifically designed for Miami. This ability to translate theory into immediate results is what should concern Red Bull most, because it shows that McLaren has stopped experimenting and started executing. Beyond Lando Norris's victory, what was truly revealing was the way McLaren managed the race. The team made tactical decisions that reflect not only intelligence but composure. They knew how to read Verstappen's pace, maintain the pressure without making mistakes, and most importantly, seize the precise moment to launch the final attack. The perfect use of a safety car was just the tip of the iceberg. What lies behind it is a team that has learned from its past mistakes, optimized its simulation tools, and is operating with a level of technical cohesion reminiscent of the best Red Bull of previous years. Their car's performance and race pace, especially in tire management and mid-corner stability, was superior to that of the RB21, something that until very recently seemed unthinkable. And if this happens on more than one circuit, Red Bull will not only lose its advantage, it will lose the championship. The most worrying thing for Red Bull is not only that McLaren has made a qualitative leap, but that it has done so with a still very wide margin for improvement. Unlike more conservatively designed cars, McLaren's single-seater has room for further improvements without the need for extreme redesigns. This means they can continue to make small advances that, when combined, represent continuous progress. Furthermore, both Norris and Piastri have proven themselves up to the challenge. In particular, Norris has matured as a driver and is beginning to drive with the authority of a leader, while Piastri continues to establish himself as one of the most solid prospects on the grid. This combination of talent, technical innovation, and strategic growth makes McLaren a structural threat, not a circumstantial one. This shift in the power dynamic completely alters the championship landscape. Until recently, Red Bull could afford to make minor mistakes knowing that its technical advantage was enough to keep it ahead. Now that cushion has disappeared. Every bad decision, every poorly executed race can be punished with a loss of crucial points. And the worst part for Red Bull is that McLaren is not alone. Ferrari has also shown signs of growing competitiveness. But what makes the Woking team unique is its tendency towards sustained growth, its ability to adapt, and its focus on operational efficiency. It's no longer just about speed. It's about race intelligence, something that was evident in Miami. In this new context, Max Verstappen is no longer competing solely against the clock or his own mistakes, but against a rival structure that has built, step by step, a solid, efficient, and very well-led technical project. Therefore, the big question now is, if McLaren is already at Red Bull's level, how much further can it grow between now and the end of the season? And more importantly, are we witnessing the beginning of a new era where Red Bull, for the first time in years, no longer has absolute control? To answer that question, it's key to look ahead and understand what might happen if this pace of change continues, and if Verstappen begins to seriously consider new options outside of his current team. What lies ahead for Red Bull is not just a technical challenge, but a complete test of character as an organization. After the strategic coup in Miami and McLaren's resounding performance, the Milton Keynes team is entering a phase where simply maintaining its advantage is no longer enough. It now needs to reinvent itself. And the most challenging aspect is that it must do so in the middle of the season, under the constant pressure of direct competition, media scrutiny, and internal tensions. The next phase of the championship presents itself as a minefield. Circuits such as Imola, Monaco, and Barcelona will test both the RB21's responsiveness and the versatility of its technical development. These tracks have very different characteristics, meaning that any lingering weaknesses will be quickly exposed. If the car continues to show vulnerabilities in slow corners or on street circuits, as happened in Miami, Red Bull could see its dominant position eroded faster than many anticipate. But beyond the technical aspects, what lies ahead for Red Bull involves strategic decisions that will shape the team's future. At the heart of these decisions is the continuity and commitment of its key figures. The situation with Adrian Newey, for example, has created a domino effect. Although his formal departure has not yet been fully finalized, the mere possibility of the most influential designer of the modern era permanently leaving the project has already created uncertainty. His aerodynamic vision and sensitivity were a differentiating factor that is now in doubt. This forces the team to redistribute responsibilities, accelerate the development of internal talent, and redesign its technical leadership structure. This transition process, in any organization, usually involves a period of adaptation. And Red Bull has no margin for error to navigate it calmly. It must do so while fighting to defend a championship and while its rivals grow with each race. There is also the Verstappen issue. What lies ahead for Red Bull cannot be understood without analyzing how its relationship with the Dutch driver is evolving. Until now, Max has been the cornerstone of the project. The entire team has revolved around his style, his needs, and his level of demand. But the defeat in Miami, coupled with growing rumors about his discomfort and internal movements that have left him more isolated than usual, could upset that balance. If Verstappen feels that the team no longer guarantees him a clearly dominant car or that his voice lacks the weight it once had, it's not unreasonable to imagine a scenario in which he begins to explore options beyond Red Bull. Not necessarily for 2025, but with a view to a more strategic shift towards 2026, when the new technical regulations completely alter the current order. And if Red Bull fails to demonstrate solidity before that happens, it could face a breakout that would not only mean losing its star driver, but also a large part of the technical team that supports him. In that sense, the upcoming races are not just sporting events. They are, in many ways, institutional trials. Red Bull needs a strong response, not so much in the form of a single victory, but as a clear signal that it understands the gravity of the moment. Coherent technical evolution, sound strategic decisions, and, above all, a message of unity and strong leadership could be enough to contain external pressure and restore some peace of mind to the team. But if they fail to send that message, if doubts persist, if improvements don't work, if Verstappen continues to appear distant, the situation could deteriorate very quickly. And so, with all the elements on the table, it's inevitable to look ahead with a crucial question. Are we simply witnessing a difficult period for Red Bull, or the beginning of a transition cycle in which the dominance we've known over the past few years begins to crumble? Now that we have the entire technical, political, and sporting context clear, it's time to enter the final stretch. What could happen if Verstappen decides to take the step that many are already expecting? And what impact would that have on the balance of power in Formula One?